Chef Rob Connoley is walking through the Gila National Forest, looking for ingredients for tonight's menu at his restaurant, the Curious Cumquat in Silver City.
I just know so many chefs who, they sit in that kitchen all day, every day, breathing in the smoke and working the long hours. And for me, it's just the food's so connected to the land.
Foraged plants like stinging nettles, hackberries and amaranth make up about 40% of Connolly's dinner menu. But right now, Connolly is digging cattails out of the ground.
Oh, so I peeled this one way back for you.
Should I just bite the whole thing?
Yeah. If it's tender enough to bite, it's tender enough to chew.
Okay. It's kind of like fettuccine or something.
It's like a cucumber fettuccine.
Yeah.
And so that comment, that's a great example of how I get ideas for the menu.
6 years ago, the Curious Cumquat was a locavore restaurant. When Connolly came across some research on how Apaches in the region years and years ago were feeding themselves, he started cooking with foods like acorns, wild grasses, seeds and cattails.
That led me to a nice little palette of food that I could pull out of the woods myself.
Connolly says finding and foraging food is one thing, but preparing and serving it to paying customers at a high-end restaurant takes an inventive, even untried, approach to cooking. After years of being open and a string of reviews in some of food's most prestigious magazines like Saveur, the Curious Cumquat has become a seminal destination restaurant.
We've been getting a lot from Seattle and Portland, a lot from the Bay Area, San Francisco, and a lot from the Northeast, still from the New York Times article.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's bizarre. Like, we never dreamed it would be like this. We're just a little restaurant in the middle of nowhere.
A lot of Connolly's time is spent driving and trekking into national parks, where wild food hasn't been exposed to traffic, industry and air pollution. He says it's New Mexico's sparse, spread out population and lack of development that makes it one of the more ideal places in the country to serve and source foraged food.
You can find foraged food restaurants in most major cities, okay? But should we be eating that food? And so if I can push the ethic that says there really is only a couple places in the US that we should even consider eating food pulled out of the wilderness, then I think that has an impact economically on this region of the state and ultimately the state.
But the New Mexico Environment Department says serving foraged foods is a public health concern and goes against regulations. They declined to be interviewed, but in a statement said, "For the protection of public health, all food sold and served to the public must be procured from an approved source."
What is an approved source? If I pick up a phone and say, "Get me amaranth," no one can get me amaranth. I can go in a 10-minute drive and get amaranth. The vast majority of my ingredients, hackberry, amaranth, nettle, these are not things you can buy. They don't exist to be purchased, but they're known to be safe food sources.
Still, the food code the New Mexico Environment Department is charged with enforcing doesn't specifically mention foods that have been foraged, except for wild mushrooms, which can be foraged and served by restaurants that have been approved to do so. But New Mexico is yet to adopt this part of the code or any related licensing mechanism. Connolly says he hopes it and equivalent procedures can be developed to allow restaurants to bring New Mexico's pristine wilderness to the table without having to operate in a regulatory grey area.
And policymakers they don't have the time to invest, and I don't know that they should be investing. They do need to protect my customers, but they also need to be able to support systems that are different than the big systems.
He says he consults and works with professors in the field and documents his foraging to be in check with what he thinks wild food policy would look like. For KRWG, I'm Simon Thompson.